Hi, I'm Alex. Today we're going to be talking about how you can use art to enhance your stories. And it's not always in the way you think. But we'll start with the most obvious ones. Making maps. Maps are a really good way of figuring out things like how long does it take to travel from here to here? Sometimes you'd be surprised when you're writing your story and you're trying to figure it out. It seems like the villages or the towns or whatever would be closer than they actually are. And you can kind of forget that, or just not, because you don't have a visual representation, you may underestimate or overestimate how long that will take. Having a map will give you a reminder and a more visual way of seeing that journey, especially if there are things like mountains, swamps, canyons, something in real life, because I don't write in the genre I don't know about, that can get in their way and slow them down. Maps are also a really good way to kind of figure out the landscape of your story. An example is my story that I'm currently world building for. Several parts of the land are made up of, for lack of a better term, very swampy, very sort of mucked up, for lack of a better way of saying it, landscape. So when I create a map for it, if I mark off those areas in a different color or with a certain marking, I'll know that, okay, this is where that border is. Or I can go, well, I was going to put a city here, but it wouldn't make sense for them to be that close to this area. It just helps you figure out the different parts of your landscape, because who knows, maybe for your story you need a river in a very specific location, but you don't want it to run through an area, and it may accidentally, if you don't have a way of remembering, oh, this area extends to this amount of space. Another reason to make a map is it's actually kind of helpful for figuring out if there's a war going on or there was one. It helps you kind of figure out who's fighting who's on whose side. If, much like here, if you look at history, when the U.S. had the North versus South, there was a distinct line of who was fighting who. If your story has that sort of thing, it's a good way of splitting out who's on whose side, that sort of thing. Next bit of art you could do, character portraits. They're actually not something I'm real great at, but they're definitely fun in my opinion, because they can provide a sort of visual reminder of what your characters look like. If that way, you don't have to necessarily go through the 300-page worksheet, character sheet you created just to find out their hair color. Some of us may still do that anyway. Anyway, character portraits just are that quick visual reminder of your character's appearance. It's also a great way of figuring out what they look like if you're still not quite sure. You may have a name, you may have a background, but you're like, do I want them to have long hair or short hair? Do I want this color eye versus this one, if that matters to you? But drawing the portrait lets you kind of experiment with their looks before you decide on their final appearance. Another thing you could choose to do is draw out the scenes you know must be in your story. Suppose that there is a meeting that you know must happen in your story. You could draw a picture of the meeting hall where it's happening. You could draw a picture of the major city of your story. All of these would act as a way of developing these locations to not only solidify what they look like in your mind, but also figure out the sort of style of architecture you may want going on, or figure out the little details. So suppose your character is going to a meeting with someone, and this is someone who is distinctly more powerful than them. Well, you could subtly imply that through your scene, but if you're not sure how to do that, maybe it would be easier for you to start with drawing the scene and adding little details to the drawing that kind of imply that the character's stronger. And then you have this visual of, oh, okay, when I write this scene, I want to include these details. And in that way, it kind of acts as a bit of world building as well. It also just in general helps you keep track of the major parts of your story that you need to take care of when you're writing it. And sometimes you need that reminder. Now, some other not drawing, possibly drawing, but not always drawing related arts you could do. If you're into cosplay and that whole thing, you could create an outfit. Actually, even if you're not into cosplay, if you're into cosplay, sewing, that whole thing, you could create an outfit that is your character. If you have multiple characters, you could make multiple costumes. But you could make a costume of that character and just kind of figure out little things like, oh, well, they'd wear this color and they'd wear, maybe they wear emerald green brocade with silver fastenings and black suede shoes. I don't know. I just threw something out there. But in taking all that time to develop the outfit and to figure out things like fabrics and colors and styles and all the things that go into it, it solidifies that character all the more in your head. And it really just helps you get to know that character. And hey, if you want, you could go as far as taking pictures of yourself in character and adding that to, wherever you keep your little story things, whether in a folder, a book, online, whatever. You could, if you wanted, create flags. So say you have a bunch of kingdoms or villages in your story. If the major cities have a flag, you could then design the flag, because now you're looking at what imagery is relevant to my story. What colors are most prevalent and available? If your story takes place before they had modern dyes, what and where would they get these dyes from? What kind of stitching would they use? And yes, a lot of this comes down to world building, but in truth, when you're doing that sort of thing, it kind of all comes into world building. But it's these little things that you wouldn't normally think of as being important that suddenly become very important. You could, if you're into cooking, create some foods or create meals that would be very common to your story. If the people in your story rely very heavily on farming and vegetation, what kind of foods would they make? Come up with those foods. Try making them. Maybe make a dinner one night that's just meals from your world. If you are into woodworking, because I'm sure you're all out there somewhere, whether you listen to me, who knows, but if you're into woodworking, why not create a small chest or cabinet in the style that would be prevalent in your world? Do they use really fancy engravings? Do they use steel? Do they use something? I'm really not big on, I don't know much about carpentry, so go with it. If that's your thing, use it to help you. If one of your hobbies is needlework, if you do embroidery, cross stitch, make something that's either a design from your world or something that people would use or wear, because then you're coming back to what colors, what designs would they do? Do they do swirly designs? Are they very angular in what they make? Just sit down, think about it, figure it out, whatever your process is for doing that. All of it really helps you develop the world you're working on. And for every hobby there is something in that can help you develop your world. I'm sure if you do metalwork, then hey, how are these weapons forged, or how would cutlery be forged? If you do glasswork, what processes do they use to create anything that's made of glass? Is it a much older form than what you use? Do they incorporate any of the techniques you know? Create pieces that would look like it. I'm not kidding when I say whatever hobby or artistic endeavor, even if you don't think it's artistic, I'm probably sure, I am 100% sure, even if you don't think it's artistic, it probably is. All of these can just lend to helping you understand the world you're creating even more. What hobbies can you use to enhance your stories? I'll see you in my next video. Bye!